Hi. So what is major surgery like? I'm making this video to talk about my experience through a major surgery. Mine was a liver transplant. And I'm hoping that somebody who is afraid of having an upcoming major surgery, not necessarily a liver transplant, but perhaps a liver transplant, I'm hoping this video will help to ease their fears, because a major surgery is very scary. And I remember growing up and throughout my young adult life, I always thought, oh man, I hope I can avoid surgery in my life. It sounds so scary. You know, you get anesthesia and it knocks you out, and you hear horror stories about some people not waking up and stuff like that. And that was one of my biggest fears ever, was to ever have to go through a major surgery. Ironically, another fear of mine as a kid was having to have an organ transplant. I don't know why, but I've done both. But yeah, it was scary. And I remember leading up to my transplant, there were two processes of thought always running through my mind. One was sheer dread and fear of the upcoming surgery, not knowing the outcome, hoping I survive. Am I going to make it? I always would. Am I going to make this? I'd ask doctors, am I going to make it through this? Am I going to live? It was really scary. The other thought was, oh gosh, I hope I get a transplant before I die, which is also another scary scenario. But going back to the first thought and being scared all the time, I remember it really helped me to reach out and talk to people who've already been through it. That's why I'm making this video, so you can hear my experience. It's perfectly natural to be scared. I remember doctors telling me if you weren't scared, I would be concerned about your mental state. There would be something wrong with you, because doing this is a leap of faith. And it's terrifying, but you don't have to be terrified. You're gonna make it. You'll be fine. The doctors are very, very skilled, and I mean, this is what they do, and they're the best of the best. You know, when you go in for a major surgery, there's a team of doctors, anesthesiologists, doctors, nurses, and they are the best. And they made it there because they've been the best of all their colleagues. It's kind of like, if you think back to previous generation, the mission control going to the moon, right? Those scientists, those people, they were the best of the best, and they did it. And that's what your surgical experience will be like with these doctors. And you know, to you it seems like major surgery, but to these guys and gals, it's just a Tuesday for them. So you can trust them. I remember leading up to the surgery, I think the scariest part was a few days before. You know, when I knew it was getting closer, I was scared and nervous. And I reached out to people and talked to people. I met people online through support groups on Facebook. There's a few liver support groups that I was part of and still am contributing to. And I've talked to them on the phone, and it would help calm my fears. But my fears never went away, you know. And then it came to the morning of the surgery, And once you get to that morning, those fears kind of turn into nervousness, excitement, but also relief that the day is here and it's coming. You're gonna do it and you're gonna get it over with. Now I'll talk specifically now about my actual experience with a liver transplant. I'm sure a lot of this will relate to other major procedures, but some of it might not. And I don't know how much of it will or won't, because I can only speak from experience of having a liver transplant. I remember the morning I was set to go in. They called me the night before. They said, hey, we have a liver. Check in at 7 a.m. and we'll see you then. And I was really excited. And that morning I woke up and hung out with my kids a little bit. I remember I took a picture with my 3 boys, all of us together. And in my mind, I thought, this could be the last picture we take all together. It's kind of sad and scary, but we got in the car. My wife took me up to OHSU, Oregon Health Sciences University in Portland, Oregon. The top of the West Hills. And it's at the top of the hills, and it overlooks the whole city skyline. And then beyond that is Mount Hood. And I don't know if you're from Portland or have been to Portland, but scenically, Portland and the surrounding area is majestically beautiful. And so you're on top of this hill and these tall towers overlooking these amazing views, about to have a life-altering procedure. And I was fortunate enough to where I was still mobile. I was very sick and I was gonna die, but I lucked out that I was only sick for 8 months before I had a transplant. So my muscles weren't completely wasted away. I was still able to walk. And I remember my wife pulled up to the hospital entrance and let me out so she could go park the car. And I just walked in there on my own volition, thinking, walking into this place to get a friggin' liver transplant. And I checked in and gave them my name. They said, what are you here for? I said, a liver transplant. Oh. And they looked at the date and they noticed it was also my birthday. And I remember the receptionist said, wow, you're getting quite a birthday gift. And I said, yes, I am. And they checked me in, they put a band around me, and I sat in the lobby, beautiful lobby of this beautiful medical center. And I'm looking around thinking, gosh, if I'm here for a liver transplant, what are all these people here for? You know, this is the major leagues of hospitals. Like, everybody in here is having something big, you know. And then, you know, it's a big ordeal. And I remember they didn't wheel me. I was still mobile. I walked back to an office where they had some sort of guest specialist check-in person, and they got everything lined up. And that's where they put the bracelet on me. And then I went back and waited, and then they called me, and I went up to my first room. And you know, this is a very tall building with multiple floors. I can't remember, you know, up or down. Get on the elevator. Walked into a room. It was a standard hospital room with a bed, a TV, and a full bathroom. And then on the board it says, you know, what are we having today? And it said liver transplant. And it had the name of my nurse, and it had the name of my surgeon. And then it had directions, you know, no food, no water, of course. And then it said, whatever, mobile, can walk. And I hung out there for an hour or so with my wife, and I had various people come in and visit me. Anesthesiologists came in, talked to me about the procedure. Nurse came in, drew 32 vials of blood, and then I had another nurse who was kind of like my attendant, right? And he gave me all the stuff. I had to go and shower. They gave me a special soap I had to wash off with this disinfecting soap and put a gown on and then lay in bed. I remember I was trying to keep my mind off of what was happening, so I was watching TV. And then the surgeon came in. I remember my surgeon. I'm not going to say his name, but very good surgeon. I mean, I'm living proof. Very matter of fact, I mean, these guys are. He told me about the procedure, what he's going to do, how it's going to be successful. He offered me words of encouragement. I remember him saying something like, we have a 99 point something success rate at this hospital. You're going to make it. And I said, well, what about the 1% or something? He goes, well, then we figure it out, but don't worry about it. And so I remember it was funny because he walked in, he had his white coat on, but he had slacks, dress shoes, button-up shirt, like he was dressed. This was his only thing for the day, like a liver transplant. And he came to work dressed professionally, like he was going to a business meeting just to meet me. And then later on, I'm sure, who knows what he does, probably studies my charts and looks at imagery. And, a couple hours later, he was there in scrubs and everything, ready to operate on me. And, given that it's a 10 to 12 hour operation, I was his only patient that day. Anyway, so after being in that room, being showered, finally met with another person on the anesthesiology team. I think this was, I can't remember which one it was, but they said, okay, we're going to take you back into your pre-op room or pre-op holding area and prep you for surgery. And so they wheeled me into this room, and it was a smaller room, and there were multiple beds in there with multiple people separated by curtains. And I remember there was like a fan that you could have blowing on you, and it looked like an old army surplus fan. And it was like, kind of looked like, if you ever seen that show MASH, took place during the Korean War, but it kind of felt like you were in one of those areas, kind of a makeshift looking area with just a fan separated by curtains. And met with the head anesthesiologist. I was kind of shocked. Like, these people, I was 43 when this happened, right? And anesthesiologist must have been 30, Same thing with my surgeon. I was like, holy cow, these guys are all younger than me. But they're, they're the best, and they're skilled. And she was the sweetest thing. That's the one thing about that you don't have to worry about either, is the compassion that these doctors and nurses have. And they know you're in your most vulnerable, scary moment. They will be very compassionate and empathetic. And I remember she was so nice to me. And she said, this is kind of a nerve-wracking experience. Do you want some medication to help you really not care? I remember she said, if I give you this medicine in your IV, you won't care about anything. And I forget the name of it. You can look it up. Vas something. It's a benzo that they give you intravenously before surgery. It's very common. If you're going to have surgery, they'll offer it to you. You should take it. And I remember they gave it to me, and you start feeling it pretty quickly because it's in an IV. You got IVs. That's one of the things they do. First thing they do, actually, when you get in your room, is give you an IV. And then she was right. I really didn't care about much. I was just like, hey, I'm here. I knew where I was. She said, you may or may not remember this from this point forward. And I do. I remember it. And I just felt at peace and calm. And then they said, okay, we're ready to go. And they unlocked the brakes on my bed and they started wheeling me down this hallway. And I remember my wife giving me a kiss on my forehead. And she has pictures of me getting wheeled down. And we went into the OR. And I remember the thing that surprised me about the OR is it was smaller than I thought it would be. I had never been in an OR. It was small, and you could hear fans of machines, kind of like you're in a server room a little bit. And I guess when you're under, they play music and like, who knows? But they play a lot of music, and it's not super quiet. But anyway, I go in there, and it smells kind of sterile and weird. And they wheeled me up next to the operating table, and they said, okay, you know, you're pretty mobile. Can you hop in from this gurney to the OR table? And I said, yep. And I remember I got up and kind of scooted over and laid down on my bed, and I heard them just talking, and the anesthesiologist was there at the foot of my bed just talking to me, calming, reassuring, and she said, okay, you know, we're ready to put you out. We're gonna administer the propofol. And at that point I was ready. I was like, yeah, let's go. And when you get propofol, it's a very calm, relaxed experience. It's like just drifting off, floating into the best sleep you've ever had. And propofol burns a little bit in your veins. So the first thing you feel is just a little burning sensation. And then you don't go black or anything. It doesn't go black. You just feel really drowsy and you just close your eyes. And then the next thing you know, it's 12 hours later or longer, and they're waking you up. You're in post-op. In the case of a liver transplant, you're in an ICU. And I remember, so I went under the knife, I think at 3 p.m. And they finished sometime after 10 p.m. And they let me sleep until about 6:30 in the morning, the next morning. And I remember hearing, Rudy, very faintly, Rudy, Rudy, Rudy. And it was kind of weird. Kind of like I was like off into space on some weird plane, right? And just floating away. And then I just heard my name and heard it, and it got louder and louder and louder. And I heard, you got a new liver. It worked. And I woke up. I was like, oh, it worked. I'm alive. And I tried to talk, but I didn't realize it, but I still had the breathing tube in, because they leave the breathing tube in until you're awake and conscious. And I couldn't figure out why I couldn't talk. I was like, and then the nurse, had to say, calm down. You have a breathing tube in. Just wait and we'll get the doctor to take it out. And I can't remember how long it took, because you're not completely lucid when you come out of that, because it's not only propofol, they give you some hardcore stuff. So I remember I was kind of in and out, and then the doctor came and took my breathing tube out, didn't feel a thing. And then I could talk. I remember it was a little bit, dry. One of the first things I loved doing was being able to drink water. Because when you have liver disease, oftentimes you're put on fluid restrictions to preserve the electrolytes in your body. And I was on a fluid restriction for months, and it sucked. I couldn't drink more than 1,500 milliliters of total fluid in 24 hours. It was horrible. And I remember I was just drinking water. I was so happy. And then the one thing they don't tell you is, and I don't know if this is liver transplant specific or not, but when you wake up for the first day, maybe 2 days, I was hallucinating. It wasn't like you would think of like a acid trip or something. You just you just hear things and see things that aren't real, but you're there too. I forget what they call it, post-operative. I'll think of it and I'll tell you. But that was really weird. I had, I knew it was my wife. I knew where I was. I knew what had happened to me. But there were some voices that I was hearing, and I was hearing them through the intercom that's on your bed. You can pick up the thing and press a button to call a nurse and say, hey, can I have some more water? Or, hey, I have to use the bathroom. You hear the beep and you hear them, yeah, hello. I was hearing people through that, and I heard two different voices. One was an old lady, and she was kind of happy, but she was post-op liver transplant as well. And she was cheerful, but it wasn't going well for her. And I could hear, oh yeah, they have to do the liver again. Oh, that's okay though. It was really weird. And she had a positive attitude. And then the other voice I heard was a male, and he was very angry. And he was saying, God damn it, get in my room, I'm dying. For 2 days, I heard this guy off and on, I'm having a heart attack. And I remember him saying this over and over, I'm dying. He was a really angry guy, and it sounded like he was dying. But that was all in my head. And I remember I was talking to a nurse or something, and I heard it in the mic. And I was saying, aren't you guys going to do something about this guy? He seems like he's in trouble. And they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. So it's delirium. It's post-operative delirium. So that was really weird. I remember my first night after I woke up and spent the day with my wife, my first night sleeping, I had some dark dreams or thoughts. I could have sworn that I heard code blue 3 or 4 times on the hall, and that there were a couple patients dying. Like this weird stuff that goes through your head, and that's how traumatic it was leading up to a transplant. That's how scared I was of surgery. And I remember, I swear, I saw, as plain as day, 3 nurses in the little room that they can see me, and they were talking, and for some reason I could hear them whispering, talking about the guy that just died, and they really were sad because he was one of their favorite patients, and just weird delirium stuff. I wasn't seeing colors or anything, and I thought it was all real. And I remember I texted my wife, oh man, 2 people just died on this floor tonight. And then the next day, my wife asked about it, and the nurse said, no, nobody, nothing like that happened. Another weird delirium thing I had is I thought my heart rate kept on going up and up and up and up and up and then dropping. And I thought there was something wrong with my heart. But nobody was coming in, and looking back on it, it's like, yeah, dude, if there was something happening, they would be rushing in because they're monitoring you. But I have all these pictures on my phone of selfies trying to look at the heart monitor. And then I would look at the picture I took, and I would see the graph up. But now today, when I look at it, it looks just normal. And the second night, I still had, so I was in ICU for 24 hours. I'm going to back up. Sorry, I'm so scrambled. I was in ICU for 24 hours. I didn't have any incisional pain. They kept me pretty well medicated with, they were giving me oxycodone tablets, and they gave me intravenous Dilaudid, which actually, I felt myself stop breathing a little bit here and there. I said, please stop Dilaudid, no more. And they stopped Dilaudid. I felt a lot better, and I still didn't have any pain. The only pain I had was gas pain, because your digestive system completely stops, and when it starts waking up, you have intestinal gas pain and cramps, and that lasted 2.5 days until I was able to poop. And that hurt so bad, and no amount of oxycodone or Dilaudid will stop that pain. It's a different pain receptor mechanism, and it hurt, and it was miserable. But that was it. The catheter hurt a little bit too. I was getting tired of that, because you have to have a catheter. So after the first 24 hours in ICU, I was stable and fine. They put me to a normal room. And then my second night in the hospital was in a normal room, and I still had a little bit of that delirium. And then the next morning I woke up, and I heard those voices again on the intercom. And then I said, now wait a second. Those are the same voices. This is an entirely different floor. I'm hallucinating. That's not real. And as soon as my brain said, that's not real, all my delirium stopped. And then I started really feeling, so, day 2 or 3. And then eventually the pain went away in the digestive system. They have, I think, I had a neck IV. I think they do 2 different IVs in your neck. And don't worry, they do this after you've been knocked out on the operating table. But they give you a couple IVs in your main artery. And they removed that a few days after, because I got transferred to another room. I always had a single room. I was lucky. And then that's when they start removing the IVs. I had a JP drain, I think it's called. It's a drain in your belly that drains fluid. That sucked, because it always leaked, because you had so much fluid. So, it was just about, every day was a little better, right? And when I got to my final room, that's where I spent the final 4 days. So in total, I think on day 7 I went home. And the last day they took the drain out, sutured it up. They take the neck IV out like 4 days after, I think. They took the first neck IV out, I think, in the ICU. But then there was another one. I can't remember. The first part was kind of blurry. And then the drain out, and then they take your arm IV out the last. And yeah, life was basically being in the hospital, getting your energy back, eating. They make you do physical therapy. Even on the very first day, they make you sit up, teach you how to get up, because you can't use your abdominal muscles at all. So they teach you how to get up on your bed, position your legs out, fall, not fall, but slide down. And I had to use a walker, and they make you walk very first day. And they have physical therapy come to your room twice a day near the end there. You have to take laps around the floor with your walker. They make you go up a couple steps. They make you sit up in a chair. Starting day 1, you have to sit up in a chair. Going to the bathroom, they'll assist you a little bit, as much as you need, So, the first week you really had to have a lot of assistance going to the bathroom. And after a liver transplant, you have to pee a lot, because you're getting rid of a lot of fluid, so you're always up. And the hardest part for me was I had a lot of lower leg and ankle and foot swelling at the beginning, which is very painful, very, very painful. That combined with weak legs and not being able to walk well, I always needed assistance getting up in the bed, and I needed that for about a week, my first week home too. But yeah, every day got stronger, every week got stronger, and then by 2 months, man, I was getting in my car every morning and driving to work, going full-time in office. So anyway, I hope this story made sense and helped. I hope I didn't ramble too much. It was quite of an experience. It made me so much stronger, though, like you couldn't believe. So, if you're about to have surgery, major surgery, and or especially a liver transplant, it's okay to be scared, but don't be terrified, and reach out for help. Talk to people, and you're gonna be fine. You're gonna make it. I did. I'm just fine now. All right. Take care.